Would you volunteer to clean someone's stinky feet? Well, Jesus did, and he said that we should follow that example. Jesus said, shine somebody's shoes. Good morning, and welcome to 755 Live. For about 5 minutes, you'll hear all about easy-to-remember soundbite versions of what Jesus said. And the point is to help you experience life to the fullest, the Jesus way. Today's Jesus said comes from John 13:14, but we're going to read more of the story, so we'll start with verse 12. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again, this is Jesus, of course, and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." Jesus was giving clear instructions here that this was not just a concept, this was not just a philosophy. This is something that we were and are supposed to do. He said, "I've given you an example to follow." And that example was washing stinky feet. Now, it's easy for us to say, well, that's not my job. There are things that we just don't want to do. Being a servant, being a shoe shiner, cleaning someone's feet is not really something that we want to do. I mean, being a servant isn't a kid's dream, like being a fireman or an astronaut. In the first century, things weren't quite nearly as clean and sterile as the life that we live today. Everyone mostly walked from place to place. They wore open-toed sandals. And so if you can only imagine, not only were the streets dusty and dirty, there's all kinds of things that we would not want to touch on the roads that they were walking on. And it was very common to have a servant in a house where you could afford one that would wash a stranger or a visitor's feet before they came in, kind of like our custom today. Some houses, they want you to take your shoes off because you don't want to get the carpets dirty. In the same way, there was a slave or a servant who would generally wash the feet of visitors. No one had done this the night before Jesus was crucified as they were gathering to prepare for the Passover and to have this Last Supper together. None of the disciples had done this menial task. No one had washed feet. And so Jesus did it himself and said, this is the example. Many times our culture has this entirely opposite. We show up not to serve, and I'm talking in a church context here, but we show up to be served. Jesus said that's not the example. He said, shine somebody's shoes. How many times have you heard someone say, I'm not being fed? It's not about being fed. It's about who we can serve and who we can feed. That's what community following Jesus together is all about. It's not about who is there to wash your feet. Now, of course, that's not something that we do in our culture anyway. So that's where the phrase shine somebody's shoes comes in, just putting that more in language that we understand. But a servant has a different responsibility. Slaves can't quit. Servants don't quit. Employees, volunteers, fans, they change their mind all the time. But that's not who we're called to be. Paul talks about this in Philippians 2:3-8. He says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out for only your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being when he appeared in human form. He humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Jesus, the very essence of deity. I mean, he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. King of the universe, creator of everything. Instead of using those privileges, he gave them up and became a servant. That's the example. Having the status of a child of God, not having to serve out of any kind of responsibility or to make up for anything or to pay back a debt. Having the status of not having to, but instead still serving, taking the lowest position available to help somebody else. It's not about being fed. It's about who can we feed. Jesus said, shine somebody's shoes. How can you put that into action today? Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you checking in, Amber and Rita. If this is meaningful to you, it would mean a lot to me and be helpful if you do what they just did. Comment, like it, share it. I really appreciate you. Hope you have an amazing day, and I hope this time together has helped you live life to the fullest, the Jesus way. And remember, follow Jesus today. Love first.